And welcome back to the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. It is raining in the nation's capital, but of course the work of the Commission will continue on day 70. And joining me now for some analysis on what we've seen last week and of course also overall, we have Mr. Tebogo Kas, who's founder and chairperson of Public Interest SA, as well as our SABC news reporter, Kani Mapanga. Thanks so much to both of you. Mr. Kas, if I could start with you, just in terms of how compromised South Africa's intelligence as well as investigative capabilities are at this point. How would you describe it?
Well, to say compromise is an understatement in my view, because certainly we've seen that without proper crime intelligence, a lot of risk comes into the fray. I'll give you an example. Take 2021 as an example. It's because of lapses in crime intelligence that we got to see what happened in KZN. But it is not only crime intelligence as far as SAPS is concerned, but also military intelligence is also compromised, if you'd allow me to add in that angle also. Because we've seen how there's also corruption within the military intelligence itself. We've got some of the top generals appearing in courts for one or the other reason to do with corruption. And that on its own shows that depth to which corruption has actually festered through intelligence, both in the crime intelligence of SAPS as well as the military intelligence. And yes, that is a very big risk, because without intelligence, we often hear it was a crime intelligence driven operation, but you look at it, if it was intelligence driven, most of these crimes wouldn't be happening, because we are more responsive to what has already occurred than being more preventative. And so crime intelligence is very much silent. And it's not something that happened recently. We're only getting to the nub of it now, but it's something that has been with us for quite a long time. You'd recall during the Zondo Commission also, we spoke about the rot within crime intelligence. And some of the top generals are also, some are already on trial for those. I'm talking here about the likes of Richard Mkhuli and many others who also pilfered the funds. So intelligence itself is at the heart of the rot that we see in SAP. And because of the fact that there's very little information shared or known, the secrecy, that also creates an element of making it difficult for people to actually see what actually happened within crime intelligence.
So we already know that there's a very fragile system of trust between the broader South African community and South African police services, for example. So looking at what you've just told us, in terms of current investigations that may be ongoing, how do you think that what we've heard here actually plays out? How does it impact what currently needs to be done? Because yes, these Madlanga Commission is ongoing, the ad hoc committee are doing their work, but still there needs to be proper investigations and intelligence-driven operations done on the ground.
Forget for a while public trust in the system itself. Trust within the police itself is eroded. I mean, if you've got generals coming at each other, you ask yourself, how are these people going to work with each other? If you've got divisional commander of crime intelligence not seeing eye to eye with their superior, who's now on suspension, the deputy national commissioner, and others also not seeing the same with their bosses, you ask us how are they going to work if they don't really trust each other. So that on its own is a very worrisome, but there's a light, I would imagine, the end of this tunnel, I would want to use that term, if I may, because there's an opportunity to now reset the top echelon of SAPS, especially insofar as crime intelligence is concerned, and any other aspect where this relates to. Here I'm talking about the fact that we know that the National Commissioner is going to be vacating office. I'm not sure if this year or next year, but he'll soon be vacating. We need to have somebody at the helm, somebody who can be trusted, who can be able to make sure that they build bridges. You need somebody who could be empathetic, but also at the same time be strong in terms of leadership. Because what we've found, we've seen so far, is that it appears to me that there's discord or disharmony at divisional command level because people think they can get away with things.
And that's a very important point. I want us to come back to that. But, you know, Kenny, as someone who's been covering this commission since it started for 70 days now, if we look at the evidence that we've heard before the commission, what has stood out for you as far as especially crime intelligence and, of course, investigations go?
Indeed. In terms of the work of the Madlanga Commission, we have seen how majority of these cases or events are actually open to investigation now. There's nothing stopping these institutions from achieving justice in these particular matters. And if you look at the Emmanuel Mbenze murder case, for example, had it not been for the work of the Commission, you wouldn't actually have seen some progress on that particular matter. Although they've lost 4 of the 12 suspects, it is through what was exposed in this commission that we saw several suspensions in the city of Ekurhuleni that are now full suspensions. And we've also seen that some of those matters, the criminal matters that were being flagged in the city of Ekurhuleni and were going on throughout, even post the investigations internally, that now we're starting to see those criminal investigations take shape. So at least what the commission has done, even though you saw criticism that the work is not binding, it can be challenged, there is pressure now to put some effort into those various investigations that implicate those quote-unquote rogue cops within the system. However, there is going to be that challenge with high-ranking SAPS officials who are currently on suspension, and the evidence may not be clear with respect to their alleged roles. And when the work is done by the Commission, they're still open to challenge the work of the Commission. And you're already hearing sentiments that bring up that discussion already, because in Sibiya's evidence alone, he has questioned or rather raised issues of fairness and prejudice, and that directly speaks to the procedures of the Commission and whether or not he's afforded the right to give his evidence in full. You saw him cite that his devices have been taken from him as a part of a war, a systemic war, as he puts it, in the South African police services. So these are all grounds that could delay the implementation of the reports in terms of the high-ranking SAPS officials. But so far as the criminal matters, there's nothing that's stopping these institutions from moving immediately to ensure that at least where there were criminal elements, that those people are brought to book.
But isn't the reality that we are seeing that they can't? There seems to be some paralysis there because of what you've just mentioned, Kenny. The fact that you have high-ranking officials involved and implicated in the evidence that we've heard here at the Commission as well as at the ad hoc committee. So in terms of just being able to move those investigations, you mentioned the Mbenze case, which is a classic example, because it is not like there has been much new evidence. The evidence that we heard here is evidence that had already been put out to the police prior to the start of this commission. So help us there, Mr. Kass.
No, certainly. In fact, if you going back to the issue, the Mbenze case as an example, it is quite right that it actually shows that the evidence has been there, somebody just was not acting on it. And we were, before IPID actually came to give evidence, we were actually blaming IPID. We thought IPID was the one in the wrong here. And when you start hearing some of the officials come and testify, you actually realize actually this is actually bigger than IPID itself. Actually, it is SAPS that actually hasn't acted in the manner that they ought to have acted, given what they knew or they were presented with. And you ask yourself, what would it take to actually change that? Because the rot is within the system itself. In terms of course, it appears to me, or from a bystander, that actually, because there's so many people who know things that about others, maybe they're afraid to ask that if I act or act against X, Y, and Z, they might very well, I might actually find myself act against me. And even the issue of crime intelligence, insofar as the issue of who's the chap, ANC Youth League, Sindiso Makaka. You see how crime intelligence was compromised, where you found that even the arms that were bought by crime intelligence, the vehicle procured by crime intelligence to cause a murder, which they ought to have known who done that, but nobody acted. It's only now that we hear actually, as the evidence comes through, and maybe even prior to this, that actually crime intelligence and SAPS knew all along who actually, or ought to have known, who actually was behind
But they
scenes,
did know.
you know.
And this is the point. Like in the Mbenze case, this is not new information. They've known this. They still know this. And yet, we are moving at snail's pace.
But the important points to remember, especially with IPID, is that the environment didn't allow those investigations to proceed. And we've learned through the evidence that IPID is not as strong of an institution that it needs to be to meet the demand of what it seeks to answer as a police watchdog. So if you're dealing with an institution that only has a few investigators, or you're dealing with a ballistics unit where the demand outweighs the resources, and you can't really get those reports quite sufficiently and quickly.
It is still compromised at that.
Yes, and then of course the watchdog itself is saying it doesn't have real teeth because SAPS is responding to crime scenes that implicate them before they can even get there. It's all structural, those issues, and by design, it's not designed for those investigations to prosper. But with the public pressure that is emerging from the revelations in the Madlanga Commission, to some extent you're starting to see some movement in these particular matters. But for some cases, some are getting away scot-free, because in the Mbenze murder case, you're seeing that 4 of those 12 suspects are already out of the picture. And without the work of the Commission, I'm not sure if that case would have seen the light of day as we speak today. Because of the pressure that came out of this matter, we're now seeing that not only do we know the facts, but we know the details in quite great length, and there's pressure to see from IPID how far this case is going, and the NPA as well, how they take the matter forward.
And then, we have to wrap it, but Mr. Kaas, just in terms of accountability again, we are hearing evidence at the Commission, but this is not accountability in the sense that the South African public seeks. So, again, how, when, where is that accountability supposed to happen, given that you have political actors also implicated?
And if there is accountability, we also need to have transparency insofar as that is concerned, because members of the public do not see how accountable those senior members of the police system or criminal justice system are actually held. Because if you take, for example, one of the Deputy National Commissioner has been implicated in a matter involving theft or something like that at a retailer somewhere in Centurion. You ask yourself, what became of that matter? She's they are a Deputy National Commissioner, for crying out loud, and we just don't know were they exonerated or it's just something that they kept a lead on it. So where there's come to accountability, we are on the short end of the stick as a public. But also accountability also comes with the fact that once you talk about consequences, who gets to decide and to what extent do people, because there's closing ranks within SAPS itself, because senior leaders themselves, some of them feel that because they know that they're compromised, I know something about the next person, chances are even the accountability itself gets to be compromised. So that's something that we're hoping that out of this commission, there will be clear lines drawn as to how accountability should work within SAPS, and the issues of ranks itself also has to be looked into.
Well, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Tebogo Kaas, Kenny Maphanga, staying with us for a little while longer.